Remember those 5 seconds during the Yu-Gi-Oh anime where they played with dice instead of cards? Turns out there's a ton of ways to play this game in real life, and a lot of interesting things you might not have known about the history of this game. You guys easily met my challenge to support my last Yu-Gi-Oh video, so here it is. Let's roll. The first second I saw the Dungeon Dice Monsters arc in Yu-Gi-Oh as a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. If there's one thing I love as much as card games, it's tactics games, and the thought of taking creatures and situations from Yu-Gi-Oh and bringing them to the grid seemed like such a genius twist on the original formula. Keep in mind, this is before I knew anything about the manga origins where they play a new game every day, so when all of a sudden I see Yu-Gi-Oh throwing down in something that isn't a card game, I wanted to know everything about it. There are 224 episodes of the original Yu-Gi-Oh anime. And the number of episodes they play Dungeon Dice Monsters? 3. Here's the rundown. He's the inventor of dice games, he's the inventor of card games. Dice Boy wants the card man to help him make big bucks. But this kid beat Card Man in a card game so hard that he died. Sorry, that's just the manga. He beat him so hard in a card game that he got sad. So Dice Boy's mad at Card Boy. Card Boy's mad because Dice Boy beat Card Boy's best friend in a card game and turned him into his furry slave. So Dice Boy expertly concludes that Card Boy cheated to beat Card Man and therefore plans to expose Card Boy to the world for the cheater that he is in a fair and balanced showdown. Dice Boy, the inventor of dice games, versus Card Boy, who literally does not know the rules on how to play. So now that we're up to speed, we can finally talk about the dice game that I like so much. I think what really appealed to me about these dice episodes compared to the early card game episodes is that the game actually seems to follow real rules. Every turn, a player rolls 3 dice, with 3 different colors that represent different monster or item classes. If you roll at least 2 out of 3 dice with a matching star summoning crest, you get to summon a monster. More powerful monsters have less summoning crests on their dice, so they're more difficult to get out. Everything else that you roll, movement, attack, defense, magic, traps, gets saved as resources that you can spend throughout the game. When you summon a creature, you create terrain on the board that matches the shape of an unfolding cube. This terrain becomes the dungeon that all pieces can travel through. Just like classic Yu-Gi-Oh, the creatures can attack each other, defend, and use abilities. There's a space on the board that's kind of like the king in chess and represents you as a player, and if it gets hit 3 times, it's game over. And that's it! In 2 paragraphs, you can explain like 95% of the rules to this game. The actual duel itself between Duke and Yugi is fun, with a mix of twists, different strategies, and as always, the Dark Magician coming to the rescue in the nick of time. Damn, we never see the game again. Duke does play a dice card in one of the filler arcs that kind of reminds me of Dungeon Dice Monsters, but this style of game never returns to the show. Since we just recently did a big dive into the early chapters of the manga, I thought I'd check in and see if there's any big differences in the way that it presents this game. That whole plot about Duke and Pegasus doesn't exist. It's completely different. Duke, or Ryuji here in the manga, is emotionally and physically abused by his father, who forces Duke to fight a battle for him because of a grudge that he has with Yugi's grandfather. Duke's father worked with Yugi's grandfather on the Millennium Puzzle Expedition, but he became disfigured and prematurely aged after losing a shadow game with him in an attempt to steal the puzzle. Because of this, he wears a clown mask to conceal his face, because, yeah, that'll make you look less scary. Duke is much less cruel and much less of a willing participant, and eventually he turns on his father when he realizes that lust for revenge has gone too far. Creepy Clown still tries to kill Yugi. Doesn't work. And instead of looking like a complete chump, Joey ends this one looking like a freaking hero. The story of the game on the board is very similar to the anime, including many of the same summons, board positions, and general strategies of each player. But one huge difference is that all the creatures in this game are unique to Dungeon Dice Monsters only. There's no Celtic Guardian, no Winged Dragon, and no Dark Magician. Yugi's ace in the hole this time is the adorable Armor Wizard Pazoo, which has the ability to equip the Dungeon Master piece with a sword or shield. The manga is so detailed with its descriptions of the game and its gameplay that it sounds like something I could pick up and play right now. So I'm gonna! In 2002, Dungeon Dice Monsters got a physical release in both Japan and North America. While there is one main difference between these 2 versions, both games use the same figures and cards to emulate the Dungeon Dice Monsters experience from the Yu-Gi-Oh story. I wanted this game so badly as a kid, but every time my parents took us to the local Toys R Us, they never had it. Financially, this game bombed for Mattel in the United States. Remember that other tactical figure game we talked about that went out of production extremely quickly? Exact same story, just 5 or so years earlier. Because it was in such low print and the nature of the game itself, this game is notoriously hard to collect. I ended up purchasing a starter set, which nowadays goes for about $50 bill, and I also got a couple of large figure lots. The figures vary in quality. I found that the more humanoid figures look bad, but creatures look a little nicer. I also learned that apparently my Dark Magician girl is not even a real DDM figure. The real figures have a circular base with their names on the bottom and set symbols. That's immensely depressing, but we're gonna use it anyway. Most of the figures I got came with no cards at all, so I ended up just printing the cards for each character that I owned from online images. The packs are actually where the major difference between the English and Japanese games lies. In the English game, you get 1 figure and 1 card. In the Japanese game, you get 1 figure, 1 card, and 1 die. In Japan, these dice snap together and unfold just like in the show. In battles, you create an army of 10 monsters or items to summon, and a pool of 15 custom dice for accumulating crests. The dice themselves are a little awkward to use and unfold, but they are pretty cool. In the English version, dice collecting and dice pools aren't a thing at all. Instead, each player gets a generic pool of 12 level 1 through 4 dice, giving each player just 4 total variations to choose from for their 3-die roll. Instead of unfolding your dice, the starter set instead gives you plastic terrain pieces in 2 colors for you to place on the field. But way more important than all this cosmetic discussion is the burning question. Is it good? Is it fun? And after playing a couple rounds with my friends, my answer is absolutely yes. I'm actually shocked. This game is awesome. It plays just like the show that I saw growing up. Dimensioning dice, summoning, building your dungeon, trying out different comps and strategies. It's just as I always hoped it was gonna be. This little abacus for crest counting was a great idea for keeping your resources organized, and the core gameplay is a great blend of easy to learn, hard to master. It's not the deepest war game I've ever played by far, but that's kinda what makes it great. You can fire up a quick match with people who have never played before without needing to pull out a billion components or a giant rulebook. It's honestly a shame that it's just so hard to collect. If only there was some way to get a bigger collection without spending a lot of money, with even more ways to help automate the rules and automatically keep track. Dungeon Dice Monsters on the Game Boy Advance. How did I never know this game existed? Unlike physical DDM, this game is dirt cheap. There's zero premise or story. The whole thing just exists as a way for you to play DDM and build a virtual collection. And just like the physical game, it's a lot of fun. You can battle a lot of different opponents in this game, including some incredibly obscure manga characters. There's also a big variety of tournaments and dice to unlock along the way, including tons of figures that are either different from the physical game or completely exclusive to the Game Boy Advance. The wide variety of dice to choose from, like in the Japanese rules, makes for interesting strategy decisions for what crest economy you want to build. I think people who enjoyed titles like Advance Wars on the GBA would feel right at home here. It is great to dig deeper into DDM and see a lot of familiar faces, but I do have a couple of nitpicks for this 2003 game. The AI is kinda dumb. Over time, I learned the massive value of level 1 creatures, which allow you to expand your terrain and box your opponent in extremely quickly because they're the easiest to summon. A lot of AI opponents try and summon their level 4 thick boys, but they're so difficult to get that they don't get anything at all. Long story short, if the first unit you try and build is the battle cruiser, don't be surprised if you end up dead to Zerglings before you see anything. Problem 2. This game has some of the worst music I've ever heard. At best, it's forgettable, and at worst, it's offensive. Here's a little bit from one of my favorites. And problem 3 is that it's really hard to collect all of the dice. You get 1 per battle from your opponents, and then slowly as you complete tournaments will Grandpa's shop finally get new dice for you to buy. Some dice are dirt cheap, others are disgustingly expensive. You can sell back duplicates if you happen to pick up an expensive one in a duel, but it's a big farming process. And speaking of farming, there's one figure I just can't get. Of course, it's freaking Dark Magician Girl! I can't get the official figure in the real world, and I can't get her in the virtual world. I've played hundreds and hundreds of matches, but Grandpa's shop has one big gaping hole right in the middle of it. At first I thought it was one of those childhood rumors. You know, Mew under the truck. Of course, the one waifu figure that everybody wants seemingly can't be found. I didn't believe it, but then I saw it. Oh my god. She gets her own unique summoning animation? And this crazy over-the-top attack animation? Okay, now they're just taunting me. But after beating him in tournament, all I got was a freaking Beaver Warrior. Over and over and over again. Beaver Warrior, Celtic Guardian, Karibo, Beaver Warrior. I heard some people say that you can get her to show up in Grandpa's shop if you just keep beating tournaments, so I tried farming those too. Wait, I just finished a tournament, like the finals just finished, and Yugi challenged me in a bonus cutscene. I've never seen this before. There's nothing like this anywhere else in the game. This is it. It's honestly wild playing a game with good old-fashioned secrets and unlockables like this. It was exhausting, but it's so rewarding digging deep in to unlock this final son of a... The last way I want to talk about playing Dungeon Dice Monsters isn't the simplest, but it is by far the most feature-rich way to do it. Introducing Arukado's Dungeon Dice Monsters mod for the Tabletop Simulator. This Steam Workshop mod gives you anything a Dungeon Dice fan could ever dream of in the Tabletop Sim physics engine. None of it is automated, so you gotta place objects and follow the rules and count your crests on your own, but the sheer number of components here is staggering. They've got all 140 of the original physical figures and cards, the Game Boy Advanced exclusives, there's even fan-made bonus figures to choose from. They got these little areas where you can roll your dice, and you can do everything from the North American generic dice down to picking your own individual dice per character like in the video game and the Japanese rules. I also just recently learned that Tabletop Sim has a VR mode, so I booted it up on the Vive and... oh wow, this is nuts! I know that my recording is at a lower resolution, but in the screen in my headset, everything looks crystal clear. It's like I'm really there. It would be insanely expensive and maybe even impossible to collect every single card and figure and die for this old game. But with Tabletop Sim, I now have another great way to share this childhood passion of mine with friends from all around the world. And here, we've got every figure and card. Every card. Every card? Every card? Oh my god, I did it! I finally did it! She's in the palm of my hand! The almighty Dark Magician Girl! It's mine! I attack you and your Shadow Realm. The whole board is at my control! This whole world is mine to control! I've been working on my juggling. Little hobby in my spare time. Pick a card, any card, all the cards! This must be what it feels like to be Gambit from the X-Men! This must be what it feels like to be a god! Look at you, and look at you! These so-called god cards! I'll show you the god of cards! I brought you into this world, and I can take it all out in an instant! Oh. Shoot. I was using that.